So my job for a couple minutes is I want to try to put together the work we've been doing with HIMSS. Juli Baker and I are writing, I think Daniel referenced it, for the last 6 months have been researching and writing a guidance document. We call it a guidance document, an action plan, because we're all about action, right guys? So the guidance is all about how do we deal with public health emergencies. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes tying together NIC, which is a very big, ambitious, global, exciting idea, with how does that translate on the ground? What's an example of how we operationalize this? Because we got to have that big structure and the system of systems and the network of networks, but what does that mean to the person on the ground who all of this ostensibly is aimed to help, right? This is all about real people. And so the paper we're working on is how do we create a model? How do we deal with public health emergencies that are big, important, and for the most part, in the way we've been dealing with them forever, don't have any common denominators, right? There's a Zika virus, and there's a heroin crisis, and there's a water crisis, and we have all these public health emergencies. Some are human-made, some are natural. There must be common denominators. There must be a way to break out of those silos and say, we can be ready for this. We can do surveillance. We can be prepared. We can respond more efficiently if we actually put these concepts that we've all been talking about for Daniel for 40 years, most of us for less, for a long time. So the model that we developed, the HELP model, the Health Emergency Linkages and Preparedness model, which you'll hear more about, is our effort to do that. And in other ways and in other recommendations in the paper, which will be coming out soon for all of your reading enjoyment, we talk about how can we do this on the ground in a real way, in a community-based way. And that, for all of you to think about, is how this big NIC model translates into reality on the ground. Because then then NIC helps the reality, right? It provides resources, information, all the stuff that interoperability brings, information sharing brings, and the model on the ground informs everybody else because now there's a national organization that actually gets that word out, that gets the learning out, et cetera. So they're like this. And that's a way all of you can think about that. We had the partners meeting yesterday at which people really concretely thought about that. I mean, there are projects on the ground in 3 states that look very real as part of NIC. And they'll be real in ways that don't just benefit the people they're meant to serve, which is vital, but they also will help more broadly because there's an organization that will help extrapolate, educate, et cetera, so that everybody benefits. So that's the goal. We're going to tell you, Tom is going to come up next and tell you how HIMSS came to this, how we got here, and then Juli will tell you just a little bit about the HELP model, and we'll move along from there. Thank you all.
Good morning, and thank you, Adam. Thank you for the partnership. I want to, first of all, congratulate Daniel and Margot on the launch of the NIC. We're excited. HIMSS is the Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society is very excited to be part of this partnership. I want to first of all just call out a few people in the HIMSS the crowd that are HIMSS lifers. Diane Carr is one of our board members, the chair of our finance committee. So anything and everything money, Diane makes it happen, at least for a few more weeks. Helen Hill, longtime HIMSS ambassador, and she helped us get this started in Michigan. Larry Wolf is the chair of our public policy committee, and then Rasul Shashva, I always get it wrong, but Rasul is the chair of our innovation committee. So great HIMSS friends in the crowd, but as we talk through today the path forward, path to progress, and what our effort has been underway, a couple of guys in the crowd that one was 10 days on the job or maybe 4 days on the job. It was less than 2 weeks on the job as the Chief Information Officer for the State of Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals, Dr. Esteban Gershanik. When we brought him to HIMSS annual conference, introduced him to the 43,000 other people, and said, "We'd like Louisiana to like you to give your input on what's happening." And then, of course, Dr. Bill Hazel, who's many of you have already recognized, but as a Jersey transplant to Virginia, it's people like Dr. Hazel that really help make sure our mission moves forward. So with all that in mind, why are we involved? When we talk to the National Conference of State Legislatures, you really, their major concerns they have are, anything from cyber, which is a national and international issue, particularly for healthcare, as we've risen to being #1 on the target list for bad actors, to what's going to happen with Medicaid moving forward, et cetera. But the item highlighted there in the middle is Zika and other public health crises. And as Adam indicated, with our active membership in Michigan and our active membership across the country, we began talking a year ago about how HIMSS could bring health IT to bear, because as we did a needs assessment, or we looked at the health IT infrastructure, and basically the indicators are showing that communities across the country have various pieces of the health IT, whether it's electronic data or exchange capabilities, are starting to mature. But at the public and population health level, there's a need for better integration and better understanding of what tools are in place that can be brought to bear on whether it's human-made disaster or a natural disaster. So during our strategic needs assessment, we looked at 4 key areas, came away with 4 key areas. Fundamentally, that health IT challenges exist related to effectively detecting and then response, so that communities are either prepared. The more we can get communities prepared, as well as be able to more effectively respond to the unforeseen, is really a goal for us. Communities need widely implemented foundational IT infrastructures. They must learn to identify the linkages between health and human services, as well as the technologies that are out there. And more as we all bring our lives into the mobile and mobile health care, the more there needs to be linkage between the various pieces of the infrastructure. And finally, that there, as we know and as we've heard from the Office of the National Coordinator and others, that there are profound IT governance and execution challenges, particularly around security, interoperability, and clinical and business intelligence. But the more that we can talk and create essentially an electronic checklist for communities to either prepare for or mitigate a public health crisis, the better off we'll be. So we began, just briefly, we began last June in Michigan because our Executive Vice President, Carla Smith, who sends her regards and thanks for the opportunity for HIMSS to participate today and across this great collaborative. Carla is a Michigan native, and Flint was on the front page of every newspaper for months with respect to the water crisis. The one piece that kept coming to mind for Carla and for Mike Zaruki and our current board chair was that part of the reason why they were able to identify the public health crisis was because a provider trained by Michigan State, trained by Mike Zaruki and at Michigan State, was able to utilize the electronic health record and longitudinal care information to be able to identify that there was a common problem amongst the children she was seeing. So Carla challenged us to go to Michigan and work with the Michigan chapter and begin the dialogue around how can we, the health IT community, help local communities utilize the data that's available, the technologies that's available. Over the course of November to now, we've really interacted with communities, both at our annual conference and in smaller settings, whether it's web-based phone calls or face-to-face, to really engage subject matter experts and policymakers to foster that open, responsible data sharing, and how do we move forward. So our recommendations that are culminating in this paper that you'll see over the next few weeks is create an interoperability collaborative. Sounds kind of familiar to something like a NIC, right? Yeah. So I think we're all in sync there. Develop a consensus on the impediments to information sharing and their mitigation, whether it's HIMSS activities at a local, regional, or national level, the dialogue that we help to foster and our friends across the community help to foster, develop that consensus. Validate and refine strategies for, as I talked about, for communities to be able to prepare for or mitigate crises. Develop learning communities within our own setting, but across the country, to build human capital for sustainable inclusion and of information sharing. And I think that's important for us all to remember, because when I first got into health IT in 2001, I worked for a company named SAIC, and they did some great things, in so many different ways. And John Parker, who used to be a head of a facility not too far from here, had been the head of the Army's response to the anthrax scare back in 2001, just after September 11th. And he often talked about the fact that there were 4 postal workers in Northern Virginia who were exposed to anthrax. 2 of them then ended up in Montgomery County, and 2 were in Fairfax County. And because the information from providers had to go from who had identified the anthrax that they had been exposed to anthrax, had to go from the local provider to Fairfax County, from Fairfax County down to Richmond, from Richmond to the CDC, from the CDC then to Annapolis, from Annapolis then to Montgomery County, then from Montgomery County to the local providers. That took forever, and as a result, we had 4 individuals, 2 of which received the right drugs and therefore survived, and 2 other individuals that unfortunately did not receive the information in time and passed away. That's the kind of thing that we believe can be addressed. The more we share information, the more we remain sustainable. Don't forget about it 15 years later that, oh, let's recreate the wheel. Let's make sure that there's sustainability. Finally, oh, I forgot these things go through the. So, advancing the state of the art, I think is absolutely critical, because as the speed of we all know the speed of technology. We all know that that we can do better, and that. And by utilizing the latest state-of-the-art technology, we can really absolutely address this in a more effective and efficient way. Finally, turning the recommendations into action, utilizing the 21st Century Cures Act to advocate for increased information sharing. Dr. Rucker will be here tomorrow, as well as several of his colleagues who have responsibility. There's 30+ provisions in the 21st Century Cures Act that address health IT. All of them will absolutely have the necessity of information sharing. Using National Health IT Week, which is coming up the first week of October, and our state advocacy days, we have officially we have about 20 each year, and the other 30 states have smaller ones, but getting that information out, information sharing, and then finally launching the state national campaign to support more robust public health, environmental, long-term, and human services infrastructure improvement. So to turning the recommendations into action, finally, the final item is the formulation and formulate and pilot population-focused, community-based, technology-enabled effort that Juli will be talking about. And again, thank you to all of you. We're looking forward to the next chapter as we publish our paper and get on with the lowest hanging fruit and of helping the communities prepare for and or mitigate public health crises. So with that, Juli.
Good morning, and I would like to thank Tom and the HIMSS organization once again for allowing us to partner with them on this guidance paper, which has been a truly profound experience for us as we've worked closely with the HIMSS chapter in Michigan on the Flint water crisis, which most of you know is more than just a lead crisis. It is other contaminants, and it's a pervasive crisis that has lasted now years for the residents and has been deeply, deeply felt as we have developed a model to try to approach this sort of health crisis. So the model that we have come up with is pretty exciting, actually, in terms of the hybridization of a couple of very powerful national models. One is the individual population-focused, community-based health emergency linkages preparedness model is our definition that we pulled from the best and proven practices components of the information sharing environment, the national model for security, and the other one is the emergency medical services model. Those two models are proven and sustainable, and combined together, I think, provide a good structure. So what is a model? Back to Daniel's discussion earlier about change management, a model is a structure to support policy and practice. And so with this model, what we're doing is looking at something to support policy and practice for sustainable health activities that we review with outcomes and evaluation over time. So what are the components of the model? The information sharing environment component of the model includes tools for project interoperability and an interoperability framework. And as you know, that ISE model really does a good job of handling sensitive data securely with architecture, standards, and technical specifications. So we pull from that model and add to it the emergency medical services model components, of which there are many depending on how you slice and dice it, but 9 components such as governance, identification of a problem early on, accessing the right information early on, defining the problem correctly and uniformly early on, and building a response and a resolution. There are many more components of that, and these will be included in our paper. But that's just to give you a little preview of what the HELP model is about. So with that, I think I will turn it back over to Daniel. Thank you.
Do we have time for Q&A? Yeah, I was just going to say, we have a couple minutes for Q&A if folks have some questions. I would invite people from who are standing there, unless you'd like to stretch your legs. Come on now, there's some space up in the front here, and it'll be helpful. Okay, well, if you don't want to, there's some seats over here.
I just want to say one quick thing about the model. It's not complete. This is, just as with Nick, this is something we will ask you all to help on. It should serve you and meet the needs of you, your communities, your organizations. So we are not coming in with any finished products here. We are forming something that we will, I think the word is collaborate with you on.
Any questions from out here? Yes.
Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. Rasu Shrestha from UPMC. So, my question, and pun intended, of course, is how can we help? how can we make sure that we're able to potentially contribute to this and take the learnings and the substance that you're putting into this output and make it relevant for us in the work that we're doing?
Well, it's a great question. I'll hand this over to others as well. The paper, the recommendations, it's all a work in progress. We're nearing a completion, but we very deliberately have not completed it in anticipation of this event. We're going to have an affinity table at lunch today that people can join us. We want to hear your ideas. What would be useful in a community-based model? What do you have? What have you done that could contribute to this? Sit with us and ask us more about it. And when the paper, even after the paper comes out, we want to get your input. We want to hear from you. How do we adapt it to your circumstances? What knowledge do you have that will benefit the creation of this thing and the rollout of it? But for the moment, we really do, and it's a very immediate answer, we want to hear in emails or at the tables or grab one of us, we want to hear what you want to see addressed in a paper such as this to optimize its usefulness for you.
I think that's absolutely important, and what Adam has indicated, and also that our board of directors has said, don't just create a paper that then becomes the next one to put on somebody's shelf. Make sure you've got action items and get as granular as you need to be for communities to then be able to, whether it's a electronic checklist that Wanacue, New Jersey, where I'm originally from, can utilize, or can share with other parts of their community. Stay focused on action. So any way that you can help us stay focused on action.
Other questions? Tom, I have one for you from HIMSS perspective. Given HIMSS has been so health IT focused over the years and focused on industry, the move towards sort of public health and social and human services, as we've been talking about, is real gratifying, and it's a very exciting move given social determinants, and we know the impact of where you live, learn, work, and play have a huge impact on your health outcomes over time. I'm just curious how you and your board has thought about some of those things as we've been sort of pursuing this work going on for a while.
Absolutely. As Diane knows, Diane comes from a part of New York City that's very much needs dependent. Socioeconomic status of many of the residents is very much challenged. Fred Rackman, who's been on our board of directors, many of you may know from the Chicago Alliance, and what folks like that, like Diane and Fred, have really pushed us to broaden our view beyond just the latest and greatest health IT for whether it's the hospital setting or what the biggest vendors are trying to focus on. When you look at our EMR adoption model, it's when we created the EMR adoption model, it was stages 1 through 7, and we quickly had to, in 2006, we quickly had to identify and build a stage 0, because there was a presumption at the time that every facility across the country, and this was hospital-based at the time, but it's expanded to ambulatory and public health since, but at the time, 30% of the country didn't have the basics, laboratory, radiology, and pharmacy technologies. So as we fast forward 10 years, and we've, meaningful use has happened, and 85% of providers have an electronic health record, and 95% plus of hospitals do. There's still 1.9% of the hospitals in the United States that don't have the basics, radiology, pharmacy, and what did I say before? Laboratory. So that's the kind of thing that as a mission, cause-based, not-for-profit, it's our mission to raise all boats, raise the water for all boats. So that's really why we're involved. Guys like Steve Steindel from the CDC, who's long retired, but he used to say, come to the Public Health Information Network conference and see what we're up to, and then bring us to your conference, and so that we can build those bridges. And that's really where, where HIMSS got started, but more focused in the last couple of years, thanks to folks like our board, as well as Valerie Rogers, who we brought on. So it's telling that story, making sure that we're able to, as the cause base, that health and human services are all addressed.
Right, thanks. I'd like to thank the...
Can I just add?
Yes, go ahead, one more time.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? There's actually a framework in the country, if you think about it, if you take the next step and think about the value-based payment models, the new models that are coming out, and how there is a connection that is there if you look for it between health and social services, because there's a lot of focus now on social determinants of health and the continuum of care models that are being utilized in different parts of the country. So honestly, the connection is not as far away as you might originally have thought. And so it's great to have all of these ideas and opportunities kind of coalescing now. So it's going to be great.
Yeah, we're excited about that. Oh, we've got a couple more questions. We'll steal a little time.
As part of this conversation, it's also the network of some closed networks as relates more governance. For example, even with EMRs, reality is that you can go from a Sutter Health group to a University Medical group to other groups, and the reality is they're still not sharing. They have the ability, EMRs are in place. Are you also focused on bridging those type of gaps?
The governance challenge that that's identified on the slide is also, yes, you're addressing governance challenges, absolutely a theme for the organization, but a theme for this initiative as well. Yes.
Hi, good morning. Make sure I don't get any feedback. I'm Charlie Ishikawa. I serve as the Executive Secretary of the Joint Public Health Informatics Task Force, of which HIMSS is a partner, and thank you so much. It's great to be at this meeting. When I hear the call for input on your help model, and I applaud HIMSS and your all's effort for doing something like this. And for me, when I think of a model like this in the field, my experiential base is doing emergency preparedness planning work in the metropolitan Atlanta area, and then in the Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Massachusetts area. So I think about a model like this, and I think, back when I was at a local health department, what were the drivers that actually would promote the use and adoption of such a model? And clearly, like NACHO promoting such a model is really helpful and things like that. But I wonder, about the connections that you all think about how such a model would be incentivized. What are the incentives for people to use the model? So I think of things like the target capabilities list. I think about the FET grant. I think about things like that. This is all me and my very public health perspective. So I offer those as a couple of ideas of linkages. And then I also wonder about what your thoughts are about how you see a model like this actually being adopted, and who are the communities that you see? Is it faith-based providers? Is it local health departments? Is it the accountable care organizations? I'm putting a lot on the table here, but I'm thinking about the drivers to actually have this sort of thing adopted.
You're asking the same question that our board of directors has asked, us to address. So the short answer is yes to all those communities, but I think what we're targeting in the first year is a goal of 20 communities standing up and saying, whether it's a nonprofit organization or an actual facility or a town, it's kind of, we kept it kind of wide, knowing that getting traction is going to be challenging. So the idea being that how do we get communities to stand up and say, yeah, this is helpful for me, and let me help you tweak it, and we're willing to be part of this this overall effort. So just really grassroots, and any help that we can get at getting communities would be welcome.
And one other quick answer to your question is Nick. I mean, this is where the intersection should come. There should be, we want to do it at the community level for sure, but this is where getting the good minds who aren't right in that community, like you, can contribute ideas, and having a means for doing that. And Nick can play that role.